Alrighty, so Bobby Kennedy Jr. is running for president officially now. He has made it official. He gave his big announcement speech yesterday. I did not talk about it because I had not gotten a chance to listen to what he had to say. I still haven't been able to listen to the whole thing, but this is the only time I have to record today. So I've gotten the gist of it. I've listened to about 30 minutes of his speech so far. I'm going to listen to the rest after this. But my initial thoughts are, I very much like the direction of his campaign. He is not trying to make the same play as Bernie did in 2016 and 2020 of just trying to go for the left wing of the Democrat Party in the primary and try to win that way. He is taking a much more perilous path in that he sounds quite moderate and uniting in a primary. Normally, in American politics, going at least back to Bill Clinton, you try to appeal to the base of your party in a primary, and then when it comes to a general election, the conventional wisdom is you do what they call triangulating. I believe that was a term that was coined by Clinton apparatchiks, and it's where you then you try and meet in the middle and appeal to both sides, both your own base, who should be behind you 100%, and then you should try and make overtures to the other side of the aisle and bring enough of them over to your camp so that you can form a winning coalition in a general election. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is doing the opposite in that he is trying to appeal to everyone from the very beginning. And so I have a lot of respect for that. I don't doubt that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a genuine person. And you can't say that for almost any presidential candidate. I wouldn't even say that about Trump, even though Trump's whole appeal is that, oh, well, he's so real and raw. And at the end of the day, Trump says whatever he feels like saying at any given time. Trump is not someone who is solid. You can't take him at his word. In fact, you can never take him at his word. You have to always read between the lines with Trump, and Trump is always subject to the opinions of whoever the last person he happened to have spoken with was. So when it came to bombing Syria, the last person he had talked to was his daughter Ivanka, who said we need to bomb Assad. And so Trump thought, you know what, bombing Assad is a good idea. Let's go bomb Syria. And so he did. Other times he had talked to, he was speaking to more anti-war people who said, you know what, maybe we should pull out of Afghanistan. And then, Trump made the decision, okay, we're going to pull out of Afghanistan. And so Trump is capable of doing some really good things. But he's a chaos agent. He is just as prone to doing terrible things if terrible people suck up to him. It's that simple. Someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr., I have a lot of personal disagreements with, but at least I know where he stands on stuff. So for people who are perhaps not trusting of Trump, I can understand why they wouldn't trust Trump. I could see how someone who is a Trump-type voter could find Bobby Kennedy Jr. appealing. At the end of the day, though, I think most Trump people are going to stick by Trump because most Trump voters are along for the ride because they enjoy who he is, not necessarily because they are ideologically committed to the bullet points of every speech that Trump has ever given and all of his, official policy positions. And so I struggle with the idea that Bobby Kennedy Jr. Could ever have mass appeal as a Democratic candidate running against Donald J. Trump in a general election. But that's only assuming that Kennedy's lack of far left fury and wokeism would lead to a depressed turnout for Democratic voters. If someone like Bobby Kennedy is able to maintain the woke coalition and keep woke voters voting for him, the people who, not the never Trumpers, the Russiagators of the world, the boxed wine sipping white women of suburban America, the gender studies majors, the African American studies majors, the Starbucks baristas. If Bobby Kennedy can hold those people together and motivate them to actually show up and vote in 2024, if he were to be the Democratic nominee, I think he would wipe the floor with Trump, because I think he certainly could shave off a certain percentage of Trump voters. Would it be a critical mass? No. I mean, Trump world and the right would be 100% unified, or not 100%, but largely unified behind Donald Trump 2024. But a lot of the people who, let's say, voted for Obama in 2008 and even 2012, but who voted for Trump in 16 and 20, these legacy Democrats, people who oftentimes are nostalgic for the first Kennedy administration, which ended in a CIA coup, that type of Trump voter, I think, would be very much open to a Bobby Kennedy Jr. candidacy. So in a general election, I think that RFK is actually, I would say he's a better match than Biden. I'll put it that way. If I was a betting man, I would rather bet on Bobby Kennedy Jr. in a general election than Joe Biden. Because I think at the end of the day, the wokesters, the true, the get Trump crowd, not just the hate Trump crowd, but the get Trump crowd, the people who want Trump in prison, I think if Trump's on the ballot, they're going to come out and they're going to vote blue no matter who. I mean, that's their own slogan. That's not my slogan, that's their slogan. And so if blue ends up being Bobby Kennedy Jr., I think that these people, most of them at the end of the day, even if they look at Bobby Kennedy Jr. and they go, well, he's not woke, and look, he's trying to reach out to rednecks, and fishermen. He wants the votes of dirty people. At the end of the day, I think that they would still come out and vote for the Democrat, because those are your the people who are least likely to like Bobby Kennedy Jr. are your high propensity Democratic voters. They're the people who are most likely to come out and vote for a Democrat in every single election cycle, including midterms. And so if you're going to disappoint a certain percentage of the Democratic base, or a certain faction of the Democratic base, I would think that disappointing the highest propensity voters would probably be the safest thing to do. But as we've seen in the past, if you don't energize your base, if you don't get your base out, Republicans, I think, have had to learn time and time again that that's a fatal error. Putting up Mitt Romney up there, who appeals in no way to the Republican base, I think most people would agree, was a mistake. It was a catastrophic mistake. The same thing was true in 2008 with John McCain. Although at least the McCain campaign tried a little by putting Sarah Palin on the ticket. She was supposed to be the red meat gift to the base. And then you've got Trump 2016, which was all red meat to the base all the time. And so what Bobby Kennedy Jr. is trying to run is openly, he stated this in his announcement speech, he's trying to run a very different kind of campaign. He's trying to run something that will have mass appeal to different types of people in different parts of the country. He wants to win in the urban areas and in the rural areas. He explicitly said that. But leaving all that aside about a general election, I think his biggest obstacle by far is the Democratic primary. Not only do they have superdelegates to contend with, which are essentially just all the votes that Biden starts with to begin with, and I forget what percentage of Democratic delegates are superdelegates, but it's a pretty decent chunk. Superdelegates can make the difference if this is a close primary between Biden and Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy has to win overwhelmingly in order to actually secure the Democratic nomination. Otherwise, if he only wins by just a little bit, the superdelegates will put Joe Biden over the edge. The other problem is the Iowa caucuses. They have been essentially abolished on the Democratic side. Iowa is now like the 5th state. I think someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr. would wipe the floor with Joe Biden in the Iowa caucuses, which is why they have moved the Iowa caucuses. Joe Biden has never won Iowa. He has never done well in Iowa. I don't think he's even come in second in Iowa in any of the times that he's run for president. And he's run for president like 3 times, I believe, before this. So this is his 4th run for president. he would not win Iowa this time either. So they put South Carolina first, which is supposed to be, a safe bet for Biden. You have the black Democratic political machine down there. They will mobilize voters, souls to the polls. They will vote for whoever they're told to vote for. We're told they are a hive mind, and so this should be beneficial to Joe Biden. But historically, RFK Sr., part of his base were poor black Democratic voters. And so Junior will have to try and tap into whatever it was that his father was channeling back then, and hope that he can have the same appeal. Now, on the face of it, do I think that Joe Biden, on a personal level, is more appealing to black voters than Bobby Kennedy Jr.? No. I mean, I think if you had a black focus group sit through a speech by either one of those two men live, they would much prefer Bobby Kennedy Jr. But in South Carolina, you have Democratic machine politics. It's just like it used to be, with the Irish and the Italians in the big cities. You have the party bosses who determine who wins in these sorts of primaries. And so the leaders will be telling all of the Democrats in South Carolina to line up behind Joe Biden. And so if Bobby Kennedy is going to make any kind of showing in South Carolina, the first state, in the primary cycle, his voters will have to defy the expectations of their community leaders and likely of their friends and family. That's a tough thing to do. That's a tall order. You're asking people to be mavericks, which is not really a part of human nature. Humans are social creatures. They want to fit in with the group. And in order for Bobby Kennedy to win South Carolina in a primary, you're going to need a majority of Democratic voters to revolt against the mainstream. Now, New Hampshire, the second state, I think is a much easier job for him. I think that if he doesn't win New Hampshire far and away, then, he's dead in the water. He has no chance. New Hampshire is full of a lot of Massachusetts transplants. The Kennedys, of course, are a Massachusetts dynasty. And this is essentially his home turf. It's also a very small state, very easy to campaign in, relatively speaking. There's a lot less ground to cover. Not that South Carolina is the biggest state in the Union. I wonder, I would think that South Carolina might be easier to campaign in than Iowa. Iowa's just, it's so big and flat, and there's 99 counties, and, every presidential candidates love to say, oh, well, I visited all 99 counties in Iowa. That's not going to happen this time around in the Democratic primary. So I wish him well. I very much would like to see him become the Democratic nominee. In fact, I think that a President Bobby Kennedy, considering just like he's an extinct kind of candidate. He is the only person who has run in my lifetime who I think has a chance of toning down the political division in this country. And I say that as someone who doesn't think that polarization is such a bad thing. I think that it's kind of, inevitable, and the quicker we get it over with, the better. But it is somewhat refreshing to hear someone who is not playing into that, who is not trying to take advantage of that and just demagogue, which demagogue's not always a bad thing. I don't think that, when I say demagogue, I don't mean that in a bad way. I think that Trump demagogues in a good way, and I think that he should do it more often. I would say the same thing of, DeSantis. You play into the culture war issues and stuff. I like that. That's good. That's red meat for my side. I want to see that. But to see someone who is, the polar opposite of that, not demagoguing on the left, as in the opposite of demagoguing on the right, but just someone who tries to eschew that entirely and kind of just not be a squishy moderate like John Kasich. He's perhaps, you know what? Bernie Sanders is to Trump as RFK Jr. is to John Kasich. Let's put it that way. I know that might be a confusing analogy, but I think that's the best way that I can put it. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a radical centrist, in my view. Whereas so-called moderates like John Kasich or Angus King, they agree with whatever the regime proposes, whatever the deep state wants, 100% of the time. Then you've got someone like Donald Trump, who opposes the deep state when they conflict with his constituents' core values, but other times is willing to work with them, and wasn't, at least until now, at least in his first term, he wasn't looking to abolish them. Certainly, he was trying to use them, and kind of cohabitate with them. And then you have Bernie Sanders, who, in the same way, he had his left-wing agenda that he wanted, and sure, the deep state might get in the way of that somewhat, but he was perfectly fine to capitulate to them, if he felt like he could get some of what he wanted. But then you've got someone like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who explicitly has the agenda of abolishing these terrible institutions, but he's not doing it necessarily to further right-wing or left-wing interests. He's not just throwing red meat to either side and taking on the deep state because they're getting in the way. He's taking on the deep state because he sees them as the enemy of democracy, which certainly they are. And if you actually believe in democracy, which most people don't, let's just be honest about that, and I include myself in that. I'm not an ideological small d Democrat, but he is. And again, this is something I respect because it's rare. So I think I've gone on about this long enough. I will see folks back here tomorrow, and I probably will discuss more of what he had to say. I think he's going to be a very interesting candidate.